So the title of my section is, I don't know about you, but feeling 22 sucks. Being in your 20s sucks. Like, least favorite time of existence, not gonna lie. And I don't know if it's like, it's not something universally like Gen Z. Like, that period of life is a volatile time. It just sucks. Like, especially when you're entering into a world that like hates you. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you just don't, no one wants you to succeed in this world. And when you reach the point where you're like, I'm an adult now and the world is on fire, that just sucks even more. And it's like, you don't have, I'm going to talk about this whole thing. It stresses me out ultimately. And this film, I feel like, just does it so well, where you're just like, oh yeah, ow. Mm-hmm. So as I said, this film was even better the second watch, which is something that the Ghouls don't always get to experience. While watching and knowing the ending allowed for so much more focus to be on the characters instead of the events. So if you do watch, highly recommend. Highly recommend watching it twice. So you have more space to witness more. And in this watch through, what stood out to me most was a deeply emotional characters floundering through their early 20s, which in some ways was a reflection of my own 20-something experience. I definitely it's a horrible time. The characters on screen, as absurd and selfish as they can be, were at the very least, from an empathy standpoint, compelling. And I related to their pain and fear of not being accepted by their peers and fear surrounding not being able to be their authentic selves. Our experiences in life have been very different, as I am for sure a millennial and also never existed in that income bracket.
And never probably will.
Yeah, no, it's not happening. I'm like 31 now and not even close. So it's just not happening. It's okay. I'm happy, so that's cool. These kids weren't. And they're very wealthy. And I'm going to get into that because that's just the thing. But insecurity and not being yourself, that is something I understand well. So what I related to is that look of desperation and terror in their eyes as they delivered slivers of themselves, seeing pieces of their masks fall for just a second, and the intense worry that that second would be the reason their friends dropped them forever. It is a very much what it is like to live in a neurotypical oppressive society that expects you to play a part in a very specific way as an exchange rate for love. And for
companionship.
Gen Z, like to have people in your life, like, love is the exchange rate. Our companionship is the exchange rate for you, like, burying yourself when you're this age, unfortunately.
We can only love you if you're like this.
Yeah. And it's just reinforced by society and our parents and all that. It's like a whole thing. So for Gen Z, their part to play is always saying the right thing in the right way and not allowing themselves to ever fail, which stifles exponentially their ability to grow and heal as people because they're detached from themselves, and it sucks. So the magnifying glass of social media has them always scared that they're going to be the sacrifice made to the sun if they move the wrong way or out of line. Imagining their ants in that scenario. So there's also something to be said about the inauthentic toxicity of these interactions, relationships, and how that branches off into, as Gabe was talking about, like enabling behavior and self-harm. Something that like Gen Z, unfortunately, has a lot of. Self-harm and enabling behavior is something that, like, with drug use, etc., like there are coping mechanisms that are just like inherently pushed upon that age group that are super toxic, especially if you're like not allowing yourself to heal or be direct in your communication methods and grow. So this method of communication that the characters used was very neurotypical, which Gabe alluded to. And in that, every sentence had subtext and every sentence was like, ow. So in the film, honesty was only delivered to hurt as a backed into a corner response to feeling threatened, not as like a, hey friend, I care about you. Let me tell you how I actually feel about this. It was like, oh, you maybe see me? That is a threat. I must destroy you first.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a window into how neurotypical culture even hurts neurotypicals. Because I think there were characters that were maybe coded as neurodivergent in this, but it was not said. So I'm not going to put that on them. And they were mimicking and acting within neurotypical society. So it hurts them too. Similar to how misogyny also hurts men.
Yeah.
As dedicated to identity and self-expression as Gen Zers are, our teen years and our early 20s seem to be mutually painful and scary in this way. I think because of this, I just felt a deep level of sympathy towards these characters and was not rooting for their downfall, even when their downfall was inevitable. And at their core, they were all just scared and lonely kids that needed to be protected and weren't. either by their families and society, the impending collapse of that society, or even each other. And the most painful curse that Gen Z seems to be forced to bear is that, as Gabe discussed, even their vulnerability is expected to be polished and rehearsed or a performance. And as someone painfully aware of the psychological harm associated with masking, I could see the pain in all of their eyes, the constant fear that filled them after saying anything. Using drugs and alcohol is the only release and coping skill that they have, because dissociative behavior is the only safety they've ever been taught by social media.
It's just Alice saying, are you guys talking about me? It's like panic. You hear the panic in her voice, and they have not been talking about her, and it's literally been a few minutes.
Yeah. And it's just like, I don't know.
Poor baby.
In therapy, they're like, you lean towards dissociative behavior. And I was like, yeah. And then I thought about Gen Z, and I was like, wow, yeah, no. All they have is their phones. It's like the only window into, like, they get left alone a lot. And the only way for them to deal with life and the horribleness of the world is that they have to dissociate, and they use social media and other things to do that. And it's like harmful as heck to their bodies and minds. Insecurity and non-confrontational communication styles are not unique to Gen Z. We are just more connected to this generation because they're magnifying glasses on them. There is just more evidence of their existence, as Gabe was saying. Their ultrasounds are on the internet. We won't really know the full impact of what the internet has done to them until they reach older ages, in my opinion. I think they're still in the middle of it, and we won't really see what happens till, like, everyone stopped talking about millennials once we calm down. So the same will happen with them.
Once we got too old for them to complain that we were like children.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a new thread.
So yeah, they're just, that time of life is volatile. And another piece of social relationships that this film does a great job playing upon is that our adolescent years, nothing is more important than fitting in, finding connections, and building friendships. And humans generally crave social acceptance as a means of survival, because our brains know we have higher chances of surviving with more bodies present.
More bodies.
Yeah, more bodies. In our youth, these connections, unfortunately, are significantly more circumstantial than intentional. Like, as he was saying with, like, college, like, that's who's around you. You couldn't help but meet those people. And like, sometimes that's a good time, sometimes it's a stressful time. We become friends with who is in proximity and who has similarities to us, be them economic or interest-based. And those connections are made and sometimes maintained well beyond their ideal shelf life. And the internet has ways of expanding that scope or isolating it even more. And what we see in Bodies is a group of friends who don't particularly like each other. And it's like played upon so well. Because they're not honest with each other, and they maintain these friendships because it's comfortable. Like, because they're not calling each other out. They don't have to change in these friendships. They don't have to be better in these friendships. They can just be who they are-ish, while simultaneously, like, never actually being themselves. So it's circumstantial, it's easier. So, like, in the film, they even call out an instance with Emma and Pete Davidson's character saying, like, they should have broken up years ago, and she just didn't, because she was like, this is easier, I'm just gonna stay with him.
Yeah, I like having the idea of a boyfriend and not having to try.
Yeah. So what we see in this friend group is how comfort prioritizing and confrontation avoiding relationships as gays are inherently enabling. When you avoid confrontation, accountability, and honesty, you stifle growth. And that's, like, the biggest issue with Gen Z. And I hope they find it in their 30s like we did. Because, like, when you don't have a space to fail, you cannot, like, heal and grow. And you, like, eventually need that. And if you don't have that in your friend groups, there's going to be a lot of, like, hatred towards yourself and self-harm that takes place. So this film does an amazing job showcasing the deep flaws of this friend group and exacerbating them in a situation of crisis. But what is unique about Gen Z's experience is that they never actually given a safe place. So previous generations could flounder without permanent character assassinations. Gen Z has been aware of the threat of being canceled, as Gabe said. There's never an illusion of privacy. Privacy is dead, and we just need to accept it. And also, like, something that, like, really stands out is, like, they witness how much we just don't have reformative justice in this country.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, that is the thing, is, like, they see the horrors and it gets called out and nothing gets done. So it doesn't even feel like worth bringing up.
Yeah. And it's like accountability can look like a death sentence, so we must skirt it and avoid it at all costs. Income bracket and the impact of social media is also a thing. I found, like, a really interesting mental health social media impact article. And basically, similar to like what we found on the Ghouls with how wealth can negatively impact our like emotional capacity. There's something isolating about wealth, especially in countries like America, where it's almost inherently made from the suffering of someone else. So there's this threshold where it can be like a good thing and where it can be bad. But when we're 20 something years old and in that extremely volatile emotional space, the wealth can even have like further damages and isolation on us. So essentially, this is relevant to bodies, because the characters are all wealthy except for one. And in the article titled Social Media and Mental Health, the Impact on Gen Z, they unpack a global survey on the McKinsey Health Institute where they examine the complex relationship between social media usage and mental health among Gen Z. The survey was conducted across 26 countries with over 42,000, I know numbers, respondents. And the survey found that while social media offers some positive aspects such as self-expression and social connectivity, it also contributes to negative impacts like poor body image and fear of missing out. And what we see is that essentially its impact is more like the poor mental health aspect of it has bigger impacts on femme presenting Gen Zers than mass presenting. And what was interesting, this is like a random fun fact, is that millennials actually use the social media more than Gen Z.
I believe that.
But essentially, despite the negative impacts, more than 50% of respondents from all generations saw it as something like we need, because we're all addicted to it. It's a positive space for social expression and connectivity.
That's where some of us get our information.
Yeah. But essentially, in high-income countries, they found that the negative impacts were more pronounced. So while in countries like China, Egypt, and Nigeria, Gen Z reported higher and like better mental health, we see it was like significantly worse in high-income countries like America. So we see this reflected in bodies, and all these friends being deeply unhappy, both with themselves and each other. And then there's also like the way the pandemic really influenced them. So essentially, this is like my opinion, but like when inundated with how awful society can be, jumping to murder is not a far stretch. They knew any of their friends could be murderers because like they grew up on podcasts and true crime and documentaries. Anyone could be a murderer. The country is a murderer. Like there's nothing positive.
And they know everyone is lying. They know everyone. No one has showed their true face. So I couldn't tell you. Like the fact that they always bring up like, how long have you known what's his name? And it's like, that's not really, because how well do you know these people? Does time really say that you know more about them?
No.
But
what's interesting about this is that there's something, placing this on Gen Z was just like the best thing they could have done because of just how it played out. It was just more fun. I agree, Gabe. I think it would be cool if we had a millennial horror movie that was just like really reflecting on what millennials are. I don't know if we'll get it or even if it exists, but I really like that they put it on Gen Z because there's something, the pandemic just did something very specific to that age group that is unique. And how we like unpack that during how social isolation impacts that specific like foundational years that we discussed in our Pearl episode. This is very similar to how Gen Z is experiencing like social connections, but Pearl didn't have social media and Gen Z does. And that's like kind of how it's a little different, but it impacts the brain in a very similar way. So there's always the distance that Gen Z experiences because most of their connection to each other was through their phones, maintained through a screen. Additionally, every step of the way of their upbringing, they had windows into things previous generations did not see, a globalization and impending doom that previous generations only had access to if they were physically present. And in a journal article titled Generation Z Values in Media from Influencers to Be Real, Between Visibility and Authenticity by Simona Tarochi, they discuss the relevance of values in today's fragile societies influenced by globalization and the COVID pandemic. So today, however, the issues of values assumes renewed importance in a society where the certainties of modernity appear to have crumbled, giving way to situations of great fragility and existential uncertainty. So kind of calling that Gen Z see the great fragility of the world, and it's fragile in a way that hasn't been seen in a really long time.
Or beneficial.
Yeah. So these conditions have altered social relationships and the role of digital platforms and self-representation and social interaction. Living through the pandemic and witnessing how little people cared for each other and people's capacity for harm, it makes the jump that like someone here could be a murderer easier to land on. The bringing up of podcasting and how this large section of podcasting dedicated to true crime documentaries, as well as showcasing what human beings are capable of, especially unknown ones, as you said, they were like immediately were like, we don't know him. And it's like they didn't know each other. But the death of Greg is a great example of this, where his death was a result of him being an unknown and very little else. Like they were just like, he's a problem. It also showcases how humans can view morality as subjective and not objective, like murder being okay when they thought this man was a murderer, and then demonized immediately once they were like, actually, he probably wasn't. So the journal continues with the study of Gen Z values and states about participants that participants also describe the society as multiculturally complex, yet rife with inequities and contradictions. Some see it as highly individualistic, with a lack of sense of community, where the focus is overwhelmingly on the individual. The pandemic exacerbated the sense of individualism, as university was experienced individually, I study. But now it seems like a community has reformed. They also discuss a materialistic society where personal gain, money, career, and self-presentation take precedence over often leading to selfishness, linking this back to like the inability for Gen Z to experience true vulnerability and therefore being detached from their own growth. The article states, according to other interviewees, in a society of prejudice where people often stop at their preconceived notions about others, it's a society where anything less than perfect is immediately judged. So like they specifically did a study on like Italy, which is interesting because like Bodies is in America, but there was a lot of similarities, honestly, as like a societal critique, where they're basically like a lot of the kids felt like even when they were being nice to people, if they stopped being nice to people, like there was one story where like they helped this kid buy lunch. And they had like this, they kept doing it, not because they wanted to keep buying this kid lunch. Like it started from a place of care. And then the only reason they kept buying this kid lunch is because they were so terrified that if they did, they would be viewed negatively. And like the people around them would cancel them. Like that was like literally, and like the deep anxiety of that. And they viewed social connections not as like community, but as like chains. Like you could not escape the perceptions of other people. And then like that was more damaging than like actual pain or harm. So that like, and then also like how the pandemic really made everything very like like American inherently is very individualistic, but like the pandemic very much made it so that like all they had is themselves. That's all they had to like protect themselves. And what they had is on the internet is this detached version of themselves making connections because they had no other access to the world. So that just like foundationally changed how they connect with other people in a stressful way. That was like deeply harmful to an entire generation of people. So,
yeah, I think like it really has me thinking about Greg in this point because he was so out of his element, not just like there's a lot of communication things that gets harped on, like when they are just continually messing with him. But I also think the weight, because he's an older millennial too, like he's like 40s. And so like even farther than like I would like to think I could at least kind of understand. Like I'm definitely not cool in the eyes of Gen Z, but I would understand what's going on and I would not be so easily the butt of the jokes. But he like when he is like when they're like circling him and stuff, like he just doesn't even comprehend the capacity that they have for violence and the fear that they have. Like he it takes so long for him to register that he's in danger. And like even when he's like reacting and like trying to play back to them and they're like screaming terrified, he just like does not get it for like too long that he's in danger.
And they like perceive him as a threat at a level that like just does not, like it's so stressful. And I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean like millennials and Gen Z are definitely nihilistic. We're very often just like, why would you try to keep going like in an apocalypse? And I think Gen Alpha is kind of like, we're here to watch the world burn. Because it is going to burn. Like, and it kind of passes the like, we'll just go in the night to we're gonna thrive in the midst of the flames. Like, I don't even know. It's like, it's such a crazy perception. So I'd love to see
what other choice do they have?
Exactly. I can't wait to see whatever Gen Alpha, like, horror movie study comes out.
Yeah.
You know, and what that says about them. And maybe someone can make a millennial. I think it's too late, and I don't know what they would say. I just think, like, we were just really sad. Like, we just lived in, like, really horrifying times, but everything was quiet and everything was, like, make pretend. And so I don't really know. Yeah, everything was just weird. I think the best you could do is get, like, the time period of, like, when the internet was scary because, like, Megan is missing, you know, like that kind of horror movie where it's like, oh, you were sex trafficked because of you talked to someone on AIM.
Oh my God.
That's
AIM.
the, you know, like that's I feel like what they would happen. I don't know.
It follows millennial?
Yeah, but it's not a critique on millennials.
Yeah, that's true.
It just has millennials in it. That's what. Yeah. That is the thing I want to say for people who are, like, maybe yelling about films that just have millennials in them and it's horror. That's not what I'm asking for. There's plenty of that. I'm thinking, like, the only critique or conversation about millennial teen young person culture that I could find really was, like, Mean Girls, right? I want that, but horror. Yeah. Right? Like, I want bodies, millennials. I want Talk to Me, millennials. I want Heather's, millennials. Yeah. Jawbreaker, millennials. Like, I don't know how else to explain this to you. Like, there's a gap. There's, like, many years gap that is not representing me and my lived experience and how horrific it was. So give me some of that. Give me actually teenagers scared the living shit out of me. My Chemical Romance. Right? Like... Give me some
Wake me up.
I'm just saying. So that is our episode on Bodies. Yeah. It's a great film. I really hope that you watch it if you can. And like Kat said, watching it twice is a great idea as well. Just because, like, once you know what happens, I remember the ending. I was cackling. I was like, that is the best ending. Like, that was the best way for this to end because it really confirms. And I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but it confirms. Like, And just, like, doubles down on the toxicity of all these relationships and friendships that people were like, I believe my friends are capable of murder because I don't know who they are. And there's no part, like, if I was in the midst of that, I could never, like, point to Kat and be like, you possibly are a murderer and aren't telling me. There's no part of me that would believe that. As fun as I can, like, have playing werewolf with you, being like, I know when you're a liar, even if you were getting red. And I would be like, they're just very scared and nervous in the situation with me. There's no one single one of my friends that I could ever honestly believe. And that's because as an older person, you start, like, prioritizing friendships.
You just have, like, a different way of developing those relationships that is less circumstantial and more intentional. Just through, like, you're like, I can't keep going if I feel this awful. I need to not feel this awful. So we need to find people who don't make me feel this awful. Exactly. And I want that for Gen Z in their mid to late 20s, similar to how we figured it out. But, like, hopefully
oh my God,
they get that. I want that so that they can heal and grow and feel less chaotic and sad.
They're like, yes, I feel so much for them. And I hope, like, if you're a Gen Z person, you watch this movie, tell us how you felt about it. Was it triggering? Do you feel like, ugh? Because, like, I can see, like, a Gen Z person feeling the same way that, like, millennials have always felt about, like, boomers and all them and Gen X and all them, like, looking down on millennials and thinking we're stupid and being like, and blaming us for all the world's problems. Like, you know, oh, give everyone a trophy and now look. It's like, you did that. Like, you raised us. You're the problem.
You're critiquing yourself. Why are you saying anything about it? You didn't just
come out here, Athena from a forehead fully formed, making these decisions. You did this. So
we just got here. Exactly.
We just got here, right? Don't take it out on us. So, I think, like, I would like to hear from a Gen Z, and if they're like, it was annoying because you're just teasing us and I didn't think it was funny. And I think it's super valid. You're allowed to feel that way. And I apologize if you did feel that way, honestly. But I think, like, maybe you also felt seen. have you had those toxic relationships? Have you had those moments
Are
where
you still in them? And it's like, how do I get out of it? You know?
This could be a wake-up call. If you feel the need, like if you leave a room and your friends are in that room, do you feel this sense that they're talking about you in a negative way? That might be a sign.
Yeah.
That might be a sign to not be in those friendships anymore. And just be trusting and honest. And that is a learned thing. Absolutely. So it's okay if you're not there yet. So give yourself time, give yourself space, give yourself peace, right? Protect your peace and give yourself grace for making mistakes and going through those hard things. And don't kill people about it. Maybe we ask more questions.
Yeah, that would have been good. Ask more questions, I think, would have been smart in the entirety of the film.
I get it, though. If I watched a friend of mine die inexplicably, and I was also on lots of drugs.
I think the drugs played a very important part in the plot. If they weren't on drugs, maybe they would have calmed down a little bit.
I think it exacerbated a lot of the issues. I think that it was always going to be a bad time. Maybe less deaths. Maybe people would be making more smarter decisions. Like Alice, baby girl, you shouldn't have been making those decisions. There's a time and a place to have these feelings.
Oh, and it's not Emma. Oh my god.
Or Emma. Oh my god. Yes.
Emma makes me sad.
Emma's very sad.
I thought this is what you wanted.
And and then for her to be like, you think everyone's in love with you? I was like, oh my god, I also feel that. It was like, it's not that I think it that, it's that I wish that. Yeah. It's different. It's like, I
just want to be loved and accepted.
I need to be loved, and no one's loving me the right way. And so I just hope more people do, because then maybe the little bits I get will equal enough. Yeah. It's just such a sad thing to happen. So, don't get married.
Don't eat your kids. Or your kids will be scary.
Your kids will be the next generation of whatever's after Alpha, and that's so scary. I don't know what that is. I'm like so nervous. All right. Bye.
Bye.